Today we're kicking off the Hanover Shared Streets Vision Plan. The idea here is that we think really hard about our streets and how we can make them better for all users, right? Increasing accessibility, increasing connectivity. So I actually want you to, everyone just pause a moment, right? And in your head, think about, like, I'm going from A to B and there's a trouble spot that maybe stops me. Or maybe you know a neighbor who wants to have more independence. Maybe that neighbor is 12. Maybe that neighbor is 75. Maybe that neighbor, wants to ride a bike again. And think about where are those spots that are challenging and that are stopping people from getting to the places that they want to go. So that's sort of the framing of this. We have to lead this session. We have our town manager. Thank you for bringing all of these wonderful consultants to our town. Rob Hausman.
Could you introduce yourself?
I'm Jenny Chamberlain. I chair the Hanover Bike Walk Committee. I also serve on the select board. And we have Carolyn Radish from Tool Design.
Yep.
And then
resident of Hanover.
Resident of Hanover. And Lucy Gibson, also from Tool Design, and Karen Fitzgerald from Tool Design, and Dick Van Veen, all the way from the Netherlands to come
You rode your bike
bring
all the way. Huh?
some Netherland flair here. And I'll let you guys take it away.
Thank you. Thanks, Jenny, and thank you all for coming. And we'd really like this session to be sort of just interactive and feel free to discuss. And we don't want to just talk at you. We want to have a dialogue. But as Jenny said, we're kicking off this plan and we're very excited about that. And, we want to sort of talk about some new ideas. We have fresh perspective on the plan and the Hanover area. And so, we really want to, get a lot of input. We're going to ask you for your, 3 most or 10 most concerning areas for safe, primarily walking and biking. Riding transit is also, you're a pedestrian, you ride transit. There may be some thoughts that you have about that as well. But, basically, as Jenny said, we're developing a vision plan for multimodal transportation improvements that, comfortably serve all users. So it's safe and comfortable, whether you're on a bike, on foot, riding transit, or driving. Driving has to be safe as well. And so we're exploring the street network. We're just getting started. We're just, getting into what data and background analysis we can get going. But really, it's kind of the collective experience of everybody here that helps us a lot in going forward. So I introduced ourselves. What we're going to do tonight is start to go over kind of some of the key considerations that we're thinking about. Look at some areas, some sort of precedent areas and how they've changed, both internationally and maybe nationally. I don't know if we have a US example, but then we also have like a toolbox, we have maps. And so we want to sort of talk with everybody about, your thoughts about the area.
Carolyn, can you walk through what you've done today?
Oh, so we are on sort of an intensive, we call it a charrette in our business where, we're like 3 days working very closely together. We're in the Murray room of the library and you're certainly welcome to come in, drop in and see us. Today, we have Dick is with us for 3 days from Holland. And so we're doing a real intensive, and then we're going to just kind of get the ideas out and then we'll refine as we go along. And then have a presentation back to the town in the fall on where we are for input. So we're in the Murray room. This morning we met with town staff and college planning staff so that we understand sort of what, some of the thinking is right now, and what you're hearing. And additional plans, a lot going on, like lots of construction. So certainly with that goes, sort of transportation improvements. So we did that this morning. Then there was some field reconnaissance that we had in the afternoon. And then we just met with the bike walk committee and got, again, a lot of input from people, some of which are still here, who have been thinking about these areas for a long time, have a lot of history. So we have a whole long list. East Wheelock Street is definitely needs to be redone. Because I think that we got the most comments about Wheelock Street. And so, but also a lot of spot specific, intersections that feel unsafe. As well as, street segments, and, just sort of, the different things that people experience. So that's what we have today. Tomorrow, all day, we're in the Murray Room of the library. We're sketching, we're looking at things. We're open, anybody can walk in. We'd be happy to chat. And then on Wednesday, we're gonna have sort of some kind of a framework that we can discuss with the town. And again, we're meeting at 11, happy for anybody who wants to join. But it will be sketchy. Nothing will be completely figured out, but we'll have some ideas. So that's what we're up to now.
Yep.
Did I cover everything?
Yeah, I think that's right. We were in the beginning of this process, and what we didn't want to do, we didn't want to just pick up all the plans which were already there and look at the existing networks and just stack it all to each other, put a staple through it and say, here you are. So we just wanted to redo and revisit everything from a fresh perspective, right? So what we have on the table are just blank base maps on the one side, and hopefully we're going to use that later this session. We also got posters with a bunch of tools we can use to make the streets safer, whether they're big streets or whether they're tiny local streets. While going through this whole process, we got some key considerations for starters, and like basic points of attention which we're using to build up this plan, this new vision. And some of them are obvious, but we want to run through them. And after that, I would want to take you on a small inspiration for a couple of streets through this continent and the continent where I'm from Europe, how we use those tools and this stuff to get to these types of new streets, safer streets, innovative streets, stuff we don't have in Hanover yet. And then the second part is where we just go to identify where we can use those different features and make it safer and where we need to do that. First consideration, of course, when we're talking about streets and public space, is that we want to make it safe. And traffic safety is nothing more than basic physics of kinetic energy, right? Something hitting an object with a certain speed and a certain mass. We always thought that speeds for cars are pretty constant. You can't touch that, and everything else got to be draped around it to make it safe. But more and more we're finding out that if you reduce speeds, traffic safety goes up enormously. And when I say enormously, it's really like if you're getting hit at 30 miles per hour by a car, you have an 85% chance of dying, not getting off. If you're hit at 20 miles per hour, like the speed we usually drive in local streets, that's only a 15% chance of dying. So your increase or your decrease in safety goes up so fast when you increase your speeds, or vice versa, when you decrease speeds, your safety increases. That's basically what this is kind of saying. And it's an S shape, a really strong S shape. And we really use that little hook to look at the network. I know that Hanover has this 25 mile per hour limit, citywide, townwide. At the same time, we also know that lowering it even further, you're running into trouble. But for design speeds and legal speeds are the two different things. So we might even think about designing it for lower speeds at certain areas where we feel that need to be. And the second key consideration is that there's not just one type of bicycle user. There are a zillion types of pedestrians, we know that. But for bikes, we got stuck in this one thing where a bike lane is for people who dress up with helmets and sporting gear, and then they go as fast as they can, and they're shouting to everyone who's in their way. And that's how we want to do it. But that's only about 4 to 6, 7% of people who actually want to ride a bike. And if you design for that, and you got your lovely bike lanes on Lebanon and on Wheelock, which are terrible, and I would never ride with my children, mainly because I'm not part of one of those 4 to 7%. I'm part of the 50 to 70% who wants to enjoy safer ways of traveling, right? And this, we're not all that sporty cyclists. We're not all that male daring one. People have different needs, and identify and design for that, because that's really the inclusive way of doing it. And that means we need different types of infrastructure, more than just a bike lane. We need maybe an advisory bike lane on certain lanes, but certainly when we go to streets which have higher speeds, higher than 25 at least, or busier streets, more than about 4,000 to 5,000 cars per day, you might need to think about separation, which is more than just paint. And if you don't, you just keep ending up with all of those little accidents here and there, and you're never going to be proactively getting a safe system. Figuring out where we need that infrastructure, and we know that we need that infrastructure for on certain routes, but where it's, we got our guidelines, and I got my Dutch guidelines, and FHWA, your national system, came up with these schemes which more or less overlap that, so that's pretty nice. I think they're still a little bit too daring, because if you look at this scheme, you see that at 30 miles per hour with 6,000 cars, you can still get away with a bike lane. I wouldn't do that even, so that's light blue area, I would shrink it.
A bike lane is a lane like on the road right next to traffic.
Yeah, a painted bike lane. And then a shared lane is just a mixed use, you get all sorts of forms, I'm going to explain it later. And a separated thing is with a curb or a boulevard or something which brings you further away from fast driving cars, basically. Using guidance on volumes and speed provides us input on where we need to provide that separation and where we can do the mixing. And there are two sides of the same coin. You really need that. There's two different worlds or something. The world of traffic and moving from A to B as fast as you can for drivers and being annoyed when you're in traffic, and the world of people where there's crisscross movements and you interact with each other, you're social, you're riding to abreast or you're walking to abreast on the sidewalk, people drive courteously. That's a whole different, this is a photo from more or less a commercial strip, but you can also think of that as more residential in your own neighborhood, where kids play and do stuff on the street. And those two worlds, we got to combine them, but we really have to design for them. And you make it apparent when you're entering one and when you're exiting one and entering the next one. And designing for that is, and these are difficult images to see at this scale, but designing for them is what we're really looking for in the right way, and not just by paint on a heavy corridor, but designing it in the right way, or traffic calming it on a residential street, so people actually start to behave courteously and drive slowly, and you can walk crisscross along that street, or I don't know, play soccer or basketball. And looking at the map, and I think this map might be the starting point for everything we try to find in this vision plan. We did identify that for walking, or even more for bicycling, there are certain key corridors, and they overlap with the bigger car corridors, and that's not a coincidence. Cars want to have direct routes, but cyclists want that as well, because you're powering your own vehicle and you don't want to make detours and additional lengths to get from A to B. So it might make sense to at least put those as high priority routes we need to tackle some way or another, infrastructural wise. And at the same time, there's also a whole network of other streets which is already there, where we live, where we do our stuff, where we work maybe, and we call those the local streets or the quiet streets. They're just there, and we don't need to do a lot with those. We might need to tweak them here and there. We might need to take some additional crossings or some safety points, but you don't have to completely retrofit from A to B. And that's the goal we have in our hands. And I think we need to exploit that in some way to see if we can capitalize on that. So say, how are we going to provide safe walking and cycling options along the corridors where we need to? We're going to separate where we need to, and then we can make use of mixing and mingling where we can. And that second network, that quiet street network, if you can make that more continuous, then it's already there. We don't have to wait for 10, 15 years to for the whole capital project thing with shared tooth passes and protected cycle tracks and wide sidewalks is finally built. It might be even longer. So those two sides of the coin again, we're trying to find that within the downtown and also further out. And with that in mind, I don't want to be talking too long. I got 4 examples of like the whole world just to inspire you a little bit how other cities, other places are achieving or trying to achieve that. Bigger corridors to lower corridors, starting with where I'm from, Rotterdam, in Holland. And take you through time, old situation. Well, we had the same situation as you guys. No infrastructure and people driving and cycling, doing everything in the lanes, even the streetcar. This was the same street about 15 years ago. So we got our protected intersection. We got our separated bicycle infrastructure. We make it red, you make it green. The color doesn't really matter. There's a wide sidewalk next to it. Cars have traffic lights. There's crosswalk. There's a cross right. Every engineer's wet dream is here. It's completely as it should be. But people still die because traffic lights are not the safest way of designing stuff. They're convenient because you can enhance your traffic flow, but you accept a little bit lower traffic safety and red light running and severe incidents. So it was taken out again, and this is the same situation nowadays with a roundabout, and it's a crosswalk, cross right. It has right of way for walking and cycling. There's even a bus stop near the roundabout, a floating bus stop. Cars go through it faster than when it was still a traffic light, because they don't have to wait for red light. You can go gradually and slowly, which makes you through the corridor faster. So all these little design tweaks, there's the refuge island, center island, bigger island, to get across the whole, every side arm of the roundabout. And all of these little tweaks together make this a safer corridor to travel through and faster for cars and faster for bikes and pedestrians. So a gradual walk through time. Another one is, the same thing from the top. Another one is a little bit closer to your ground. This is slightly north Ottawa. Street like any in Canada and in the States, could be anywhere. Relatively urban, but not high, not downtown. No walking or cycling infrastructure whatsoever. And I think about 6-7 years ago, I was able to put this one in. So parking, not parking lanes, but parking bays. So cut out of the sidewalk, widen the sidewalk for that, put in a asphalt unidirectional cycle track which is curb protected. The snow clear, snow stuff comes on that buffer. Garbage bin comes on that buffer as well. So in wintertime, you can imagine this being a protected area which is wide enough to brush with a small brush or plow, sidewalk and cycle track together, but separated from car traffic, even when there's more snow deposited in that buffer area. It's getting still staying safe, and especially also the intersections where we bend them out a little bit so cars can make this small turn and then see oncoming traffic on the bike facilities and the pet facilities and then continue. So it is not rocket science, it's just some proactive thinking about how to make corridors safer, which can really help along arterials and collectors.
Can you show on that last one how it's continuous?
Yeah, so bikes and pedestrians, they travel in the same direction as cars along the route, the arterial collector, which has right of way, and all of these side streets, they connect to it. So side streets have a stop, mandatory stop. You can still see the sign on the right side, but they also have to stop for the cyclists and pedestrians. So they can, that sir with his blue jacket can just walk and the green bike facility continues on as well. So everything here along one line has right of way over every side street. So that prevents a lot of T-bone clippings. And there's better examples for that yet, because this is another one. We call it a continuous sidewalk, or a sidewalk bump over, or a ramped off sidewalk. Different word for the same thing. Basically what it is, we started building those in Western Europe 20, 30 years ago. You got your driveway where your sidewalk runs continuous and you go over the driveway to get to the road. And we just upgraded that to, like, you got a side street which bumps over and connects to the main road. So we designed it in the same way, and if there are cycle facilities, they can be on that bumped over sidewalk.
We have that example right on Main Street. If you're turning into Allen,
Yeah,
you actually go
That
up
is a really
over
good
the
one.
sidewalk,
Yeah.
and the sidewalk is continuous and at the same level.
And if you're going into Allen by driving or cycling, you have to yield for all of the pedestrians walking the sidewalk. Yeah, so it works, and it is super intuitive. You probably wouldn't even notice it, but it works like a charm. Currently, that design has been figured out how to fit into the American guidelines, so that's nice. This is still Canadian, and then IMO's figured that out for Canada. But it really works in the way that it's so intuitive that if you're getting onto the main street or off the main street, you do that at a slow pace, and you can you're really alerted to all of the traffic modes, walking, cycling, and car traffic who you have to give way to. So all of those clues together work better than just putting a red light and a green light up, or better than a mandatory stop and then sort it out. And that's what I mean with proactive design. And you can put that street hierarchy of this is a main street and that's a side street. You can make it way more apparent than everything in the same black asphalt. Another one of those examples somewhere else in Canada, Snow Country, Snow Town, pretty similar to this one, where this is one of those side street entrances nowadays. Old situation, new situation. And you also see a crosswalk and a cross ride next to each other. And they use red again. They're a little bit petrol, might be green. But designs like this can really help and finish your street network. Same situation altogether. So there's, I think, 8 months of snow on this one, but it still works. Even the contact sensitive materials with pavers or stamped concrete. Situation. And finally, one example from where I live, a small town of, I think, 10,000 people. This is their main, well, the main street basically runs around their shopping area. And people were doing that with about 30, 35 miles per hour through this corner. And I just took it all out, and in terms of placemaking, figured it was more of a place than a road. Put a spaghetti of little brick pavers in, and they designed. People still drive the same amount of cars right there, but people behave differently if you change the context material. If you take away the curbs and take away the asphalt and take away the signs and the lines, they suddenly start to behave like people again. That's pretty funny. So they slowed down. They started to look for left and right where there's other opposing people passing over, etc. And yeah, it kind of works. And I'm not saying you should do this everywhere, but at some locations you might think about humanizing streets more instead of doing it the 100% the engineering way of doing it, because it will create your public space. It will enhance your public space. It will increase your traffic safety at some locations. There's a little bit of inspiration of how we use different tools on higher order streets and lower order streets. There's way more tools, and then giving that part to you, or how to tweak your streets over here.
Everybody see me, I'm gonna try and get out of the way. So all of those street designs that Dick went through are sort of a combination of ingredients that are in a recipe that is, different for every location. And, we have those ingredients available to us to kind of cook up our own recipe for, how we want to make our streets safer for all people. A lot of the presentation, focused on bicycles because that's sort of most challenging, but, the pedestrian is the basic building block. And so And, you know, we know how to do good sidewalks and we need to do more of them and they need to be more accessible. And, you know, the network that we went through in terms of where we need to be separated, this is the same for bikes as for pedestrians. That, you know, there need to be separate sidewalks. We need accessible sidewalks that are accessible in terms of the, you know, the surface, the slope, and, you know, also the crosswalks need to be accessible as well. And some of the features that Dick talked about, when you keep the sidewalk high and elevate pedestrians over the cars, that makes it quite a bit safer and more accessible, easier for people to get around. You know, in Hanover, I'll just give you my local example. You know, my 89-year-old neighbor slipped on ice in his driveway and, you know, it's hard for him to walk. And, you know, the black asphalt sidewalks that have poor drainage and are iced over in the winter that are right here where there's a lot of walking going on, he can't do it. It's challenging. So, you know, we need to really be much more cognizant of people, all ages and abilities, and in terms of the pedestrian network. You know, and then where we can, we want a landscape buffer. You know, people want to be separated from the traffic that they're next to, particularly on those primary roads that we showed in red, which tend to have higher speeds, higher traffic volumes. We don't always have the right of way. You know, Hanover, I think, is actually sort of blessed with having a lot of nice tree buffers with nice big trees. And, you know, it makes the walking much more pleasant. And the trees help to calm traffic because they make the space feel narrower. Then we start looking at, you know, shared use paths. So this is the Lime Road shared use path. There's like, you know, it's very comfortable for all types of users. These happen to be roller skiers. And so that is, you know, a place where I see kids learning how to ride their bike and, you know, a place that we can go and works on a really busy road. It just needs to be longer, needs to get through the intersection better. We heard a lot about that from the Walk Bike Committee. And then you know, you look at even just when you're going around town, areas that have bike lanes like on Lebanon Street, where it really the traffic volumes are just too high to just be in a stripe lane. You'll see people using the sidewalk in this way. So, you know, they're telling you what they want to do, and it's, you know, it's logical, what makes sense for all ages and abilities. There's also buffered bike lanes. So this is another option that we can think of in some locations. There may be space, you know, this takes right of way. You know, honestly, a lot of times I find when we're trying to get separate bike facilities in and you look at sort of the right of way cost of buffered bike lanes versus a off-street side path, you know, a lot of times it's less right of way to do a side path, but sometimes, you know, the bicyclists, you know, work in the street better. So it's another tool in the toolbox that might be applicable for a particular type of street. Sometimes there's a raised bike lane. So this is at the sidewalk level. This is also feels very safe, and this is separated from pedestrians. In this particular location, there's a little green strip between the pedestrians and the bikes. And so that helps with, you know, making it feel safer and better if you have right of way. It's, you know, it's a good way to go. We often don't have that right of way. You know, the vegetation in all these areas can absorb the stormwater and provide additional green benefit. So we definitely want to look for those opportunities when we can. And then, you know, intersections. So as Dick said, this is kind of where we're failing, I think, is we have to think about, because this is where the crashes happen, this is where it's dangerous. And we have to sort of bring, you know, the safe biking and walking facilities at the cross streets better and making it safe for everyone. So this is showing a protected intersection, which, you know, slows the traffic when it's turning, and, you know, creates better visibility of the crossing bikes and pedestrians as the cars are turning through there. So, you know, this one looks kind of big on a bigger street, but there's ways to do this in a smaller space as well. Then we look at shared streets. So we sort of looked at the tools for those red roads that we saw on the map that have higher traffic volumes and speeds, but then the slower street speeds may need some additional tools in order to make the traffic truly be slow enough so it's comfortable for both bikes and pedestrians to be on the street. My neighbors. So what is a shared street? So, you know, these are low volume streets that are designed for low speeds to allow pedestrians and cyclists and vehicles to mix without that traditional separation. So, you know, to do that, we really need to look at what are the existing traffic volumes, how can we make it really slow, and, you know, the different types of design features that you're seeing here, for example, the pavers, the curbless design, you know, that all has to be carefully considered. There, you can see that the pedestrian space is protected by benches and planters as well. So there's, you know, that's all a lot of thought that goes into making it truly slow and safe for all users. Here's a shared commercial street that actually Dick designed. Maybe you want to say a few words about this, but I will just say it's in Banff where there's a lot of snow.
Yeah, it's in the Canadian Rockies, and it's very touristic. Everyone's outdoorsy here. This one is sold as a woonerf, and a woonerf is something we in Holland designed in the 70s, and I lived in one for 10 years. My kids were born in one. Where the main idea that the outdoor space is really, really part of your living room, right? As people would be invited in your own living room, they would behave, they would not run around. In the sense, you don't want people to rush through your outdoor living room. And it's your collective living room, so you share that with your neighbors and your shop owners forever in this situation. So physically make it impossible to speed. That's the main idea. Not sometimes we say social interaction or enforcement will help people reduce speeds, but you can also use physical elements, and that can be everything from a tree to a light post to a bike corral to a patio, arranged in such a way that it's really hard to speed up. If you have a wide, smooth lane, people will speed. If it's a runway, they will speed up to the point where they will take off. But if you make it narrow, winding, and going up and down horizontally, but also vertically, then they will slow down. And then suddenly other functions can happen again. And you see that happening over here. This was just a main standard street. You can look it up in Google Street View and then use the time machine and go back 10 years. It's kind of funny. And you see Bear Street being from a standard random American street transformed into this just by taking the curbs out, taking the asphalt out in this case, and putting in this pattern pavers thing, even though there's snow and ice. But also orientation of the planters, of the trees, of everything. And still a car street, you can still enter. There's even large parking lots halfway. Cars do enter, but they behave differently, and that makes a world of a difference.
Could you spell that for us? We have students in the audience, I would know.
A woonerf, yeah, it's like W-O-O-N-E-R-F, which is a Dutch word which means living room or living yard.
Thank you.
So some other tools that are possible, you know, on some of the smaller streets that we saw again, to make mixing more safe and comfortable are, you know, what might be called a bike boulevard. So again, photo in the right, you're seeing the sidewalks are separated, but the traffic is calmed through, you know, it could be a mini roundabout, it could be a raised crossing. So that all makes it slower and more comfortable for everybody to be using that space. And people get used to driving slower, and then you see more people using the street more comfortably. Another,
Mention the diverter as well.
yep, the diverter is on the far right of the diagram. So sometimes it's, we stop it from being a through street. That's a little bit, if you have a grid, you have more redundancy and opportunity for that. I don't know if you've thought of it anywhere in Hanover, but I know in San Francisco, they've done that really well. But all of that kind of makes a calm, slow, low volume street that's safer for everybody. Another example is here in Hanover, the advisory lane. So on a really low volume street, this is a pretty simple solution that we piloted and was quite a sensation. Is it shows up in a lot of design manuals.
This is on Valley
Road.
near the ice arena, just south of East Wheelock.
Right. And so this is, in the Netherlands, this is a tool from the Netherlands toolbox where, you have low volumes of vehicles, fairly low speed streets as well, right? And you're letting the cars share the center lane when they're going by bikes and pedestrians who are on the side. So that there's the dash lines that kind of designate where the bikes and pedestrians are. Certainly if there's two cars that are coming, the cars can go over and pass each other, but then they more stay to the center of the road. So, if you think about it, for a low volume street, you're just using that pavement more efficiently than just pushing everybody in their separate space. You're kind of using that center space because you can, because of the traffic volumes, and you're keeping the sides clear for bikes and pedestrians.
Yeah, and this one we saw like an increase of activity by people riding bikes and walking along the road.
Yeah. It was interesting today how many people mentioned it when we were talking. And so, this is a good tool for a, small town rural context, certainly. And it has been implemented in more urban areas as well. So then, how do you make those shared streets slower? And there are, as Dick mentioned, vertical and horizontal shifts to slow down the traffic and also make it more convenient for pedestrians and cyclists. So this is an intersection that is raised. So in this case, the whole intersection is the same height as the sidewalk. And so you're kind of undulating as you're driving along the street, and that helps to slow people down. Again, in this case, there's, space for, stormwater to be picked up off of the street, separation for pedestrians still, but, a narrow street that has a traffic calming element. And this is both being raised and also a change of texture and materials over the intersection itself. So that all helps to slow the traffic. Another example is similar to a raised intersection, but it's a raised crossing. And so this is a really good way, especially in a mid-block location like this, to kind of slow the traffic. And the way they're designed, they're gentle. They're enough to kind of slow the cars, but they're not like the speed bumps in like shopping center parking lots that make you kind of like, bite your tongue or something when you go over them. And what they find with those is people, as soon as they go over them, they really speed up. So, there's a lot of, we call them speed humps here. And that, they can be raised crossing or they can be standalone raised humps. It is more effective if they are sort of frequent, so you don't have that go over and speed up thing. We're doing a lot actually in Boston. They've found that, spacing of 250 feet to kind of series kind of keeps people's speeds down. So, that is another consideration. And
we have this one too, if you guys have noticed, across College Street, right at the green, right by Dartmouth Hall.
right. So there's a new raised crossing.
And on Rip Road for speed.
And on Rip Road. It's not a crosswalk, but it's a
Speed table.
speed table, right? Yeah. So this is another, so in this particular location, curb extensions, here's Hanover, curb extensions also do a lot for calming traffic. And also for, giving more space for pedestrians. And because they pinch down the size of the roadway. A chicane is another one that is shifting the street. So the street the lanes turn a little bit. So they're offset, and that is a lateral shift that helps to also slow travel speeds down. In this location here, what they do, and also in the diagram, is they have parking on one side of the street. And so you shift it from one side to the other, and that creates a kind of shift in the street. And in this location, the parking was on the side on the right. And then you have this shift and it kind of moves the street, and then it's on the left. So, all these things again, reinforce to drivers that they need to drive slowly. And this was this is a street that's pretty straight, and was, a problem from a speeding point of view. And now there's, a protected bike lane and, a slower traffic. So, and it's a pretty narrow street. This is 30 feet curb to curb, which is pretty narrow. And then, sometimes you have neighborhood traffic calming circles. So this can be at an intersection where a couple of streets come together. This is not a roundabout. This is, just much smaller than a roundabout, but it allows, the cars to go around and not straight through. Again, another sort of way to calm cars as they're going down a street that you want to have lower speeds on. And even to a certain extent, volume. It probably discourages cut through traffic if you have to slow down a lot. So those are our tools, and those are things, we've looked at and we thought are applicable in Hanover. And so what we would like to get from everybody here tonight is sort of your thoughts about, what ideas you like the most. So we have boards here with the street design tools, and we'd love to have sticky notes and things that you think really would work well. And then we also have maps to identify what you consider to be sort of problem spots. We also have an online survey, so you can scan the QR code. Hopefully, I don't know if that is this blocking it?
It works.
It works. Yeah. So there's an online survey, and this is asking people to kind of tell us about your experiencing, what you experience walking and biking and taking transit in Hanover. What could be improved? What are your top 3, problem spots that we can address? And that's, we're sort of get crowdsourcing, what people feel strongly about that we should address. And yes, questions.
I just wanted to get a sense, seems like you're kind of zoomed in to really caring about the downtown Hanover section. I just wanted to get a sense from you of is that your main focus? Are you open to thinking about other places like Hanover Center? I just want to understand how broad your thinking is.
So our scope is, Jen could maybe explain it. Most of the trips that are short are in this area, but we do also have Greensboro Road and Etna. I don't know if we go out to Hanover Center. And we go up
This
Line Road.
particular study is not really going there, but we are welcome.
Yeah, I would just
And communication
wonder
about that.
why not, because I think those rural roads, especially if you leave out that section as you're calming the traffic here, it seems like drivers will drive faster on some of those roads, which have even less protection. I would love to be mindful of the Etna Library, as another place of interest for pedestrians.
Yeah, so I think the Etna Village is sort of in our scope
Okay.
area, and
Good to
seems
know.
like, the Etna
Basically to the 2 villages.
Okay.
The Etna Village seems like it's an area that could use definitely, gateway traffic calming. so I think I saw Bill before I saw Doug, but Bill, then Doug, and then in the back. So
Three quick points. First of all, vote tomorrow. Okay, vote. Number two is, the bike, Hanover's way ahead, as Rob Hausman has told us, in terms of planning for multimodal transportation, bicycle pedestrians, than virtually any place else in the state. We really are doing a good
It
job.
doesn't say a lot, though. I mean, the state isn't very progressive.
I know, it's a low bar, but we're doing great. And the third is, having been on the bike pedestrian committee for 23 years, Etna is always on the agenda, but we don't have anybody from Etna right now on the, coming to the meeting. Barbara, we've had several people. So if anybody's interested in being on the bike walk committee, you're welcome. Thank you.
one thing I'll say that is a challenge about Etna is that the road is owned by the DOT. And so that does make everything quite a bit more challenging in terms of what we can do. Owned by the DOT.
It's a state road, not a
It's a
town
state
road.
road. So, you
As
know,
is Greensboro Road. I
it's
know.
Greensboro, yeah.
But I mean, Main Street is as well, right?
Yeah, but it's in what's called the urban compact. So the town has an agreement with the state on, you know, Route 10, and Route 120, where it's in the urban compact that the town can make,
Okay, that's-
changes.
But so that means that agreements can be made with the state.
Agreements can be, yeah, they can be, yeah. It would be, I mean, this would be entail the state taking over the city, the town, taking over from the state, I believe, probably. Rob, I know, it's like an ongoing discussion.
So can we, the question, in the concept of the urban compact, we take responsibility for the right of way. To extend the urban compact would require action by the state. The issue for us ultimately is liability. I mean, Greensboro Road, for example, has 140 culverts that are in some form of failure. So before we take on that responsibility, we want to make sure we're accepting something that doesn't create a huge liability to us. And we are in discussions with the state on Etna Road, Great Hollow Road, and Greensboro Road. This is my neighborhood. I live out there. I live at the corner of Great Hollow and Greensboro. And so I'm speaking from someone who uses it regularly. But until a year and a half ago, my bike commuted until 15 degrees. And then I crashed on the bike mountain biking. So I think I'm starting to get mobility back.
Was everyone able to take the survey?
Oh, let me go
Do you
back.
want it taken right now as part of your presentation?
Or at least get the survey
Um,
so that you can take.
You can get it. We're also gonna post a link on the town's website. So,
Okay.
yeah, so
That's fine.
don't,
All right.
you know, don't get too
Good,
worried.
good, good.
It'll be on news and announcements tomorrow and e-blast.
Okay.
So there will be a link, but, you know, it's maybe easier with a QR code, but,
There it is.
okay, Doug.
Yeah, is there a good map within the urban compact of the town right of ways? And could you explain like what a right of way means? Like what rights does the town have, say on somebody's front lawn, because it's within the right of way?
So it's the town owns it, yeah. So is there a good map? So we use the GIS base map. It's fine for high level planning, but it's not good for design. So, you know, that would have to be surveyed if you were, you know, gonna do a more detailed design, but you can get a sense of what the right of way is on the town's GIS base map. So that's, you know, that's what we use. What the right of way is it's the town's land. So, you know, they can use it for circulation.
It gets really complicated because rights of way can be rights of way by prescription.
Right.
Meaning we don't actually own and fee the right of way, we have the right to use it for public purposes. Those are old rights of way, the right to pass and repass and maintain. So most of the old roads are rights of way by prescription, and then we have rights of way by fee, which is the ownership and fee terms or a deed, property line to property line, we own that strip. So those are relatively new. The state of New Hampshire does have what they refer to as blue line drawings of surveys that they've put together. We have them from all the state roads, and Hanover's actually surveyed the Main Street, Lebanon Street back in the late seventies, early eighties. So we know the property where the rights of way are. We know what we have and what we can use. And a lot of the work that we've had Carolyn do for us on South Main and around the Green was based on some of that data.
Yes.
I'm Jacob, by the way, for those of you who haven't met yet. I did want to ask about the use of different materials as opposed to asphalt. I wanted to ask about the longevity of the changes that kind of encourages, because I think part of the reason why it works is people don't recognize the material, they're kind of cued into paying more attention. I was curious, like for towns and places that have had those for a while, is it the case where maybe residents who are regularly driving over those roads, they kind of change their behavior for a little bit and then they get used to that new material and they continue their previous habits? Or is this like a permanent change that it kind of sparks in people regularly using those roads?
So I'll defer to Dick, because I
Yeah.
think there's a lot more of that in the Netherlands. I will say that the streets that we have, I think of Downtown Crossing in Boston. I believe that there's, a lot of raised intersections with different pavers in Cambridge. Some other examples, I think in maybe southern New Hampshire, there's a street that they've done with pavers. Rochester or Manchester. I think that those have been fairly permanent, but there's other, it's narrowing, it's the way you do the trees anyway. Go ahead. Yeah.
When that user experience is different, if you would be driving on asphalt or driving on pavers, it makes more noise, it trembles more in your car, and those things really help you to reduce your speed. The weird thing is, if you're going from asphalt over to pavers, the first thing everyone does, universally worldwide, is take your foot from the gas. Kind of weird. So those sort of clues help. And then we're talking about using pavers street-wide, but you can also, for instance, do rumbling edges on the left or in the center. That if you deviate too much, if you speed up, you start to deviate more. So then you hit that curb area or the paver area, and that you hear the sound again. It's another click for your mind to, I should slow down. So you can play around with that. You can play around with contrast colors. More than, yeah.
It's more expensive to maintain. There's kind of no question about that. There's also colored asphalts and concrete as
There's
well.
colored asphalts, but that's more visual.
Yeah.
And if it snows really hard, it kind of disappears.
Yeah, right. Yes,
So hi, I'm Terry. I live at Barrel Farms, and my husband and I walk every morning. And Greensboro Road is extremely challenging to walk on. So basically, we park in town, we do a loop on the sidewalks, and the only time we walk on Greensboro is Saturday and Sunday. And always have to be aware to get out of the way because they drive fast. So, between hypertherms, there's just a lot of traffic, and I'd love to see something done on Greensboro Road.
thank you, yeah. Yes.
So I'm the Chaudhary. I live right here in town on School Street.
Yeah.
I keep getting mixed up with the school and Huntley, sorry, on School Street, and I commute to Lebanon. And I'm riding pretty much every day of the year. Sometimes my wife confiscates my bike in January, February. But I realize this is more about strategic planning, but I suggest that there might be some small improvements that we can make without any large scale changes. One of which is the longevity of lines, right? So you've noticed that around our area, these the demarcation lines don't really last very long. So one of the most classic areas is as you're coming from Lebanon to Hanover towards the co-op, and you're going up on and around the corner. That's a dangerous corner because it's blind and cars, when they come around that corner, they're usually exceeding the speed limit.
Right.
And they're hugging the inside,
Right,
especially if there's traffic on the opposite side.
right.
So that's a dangerous area, and the lines there barely last maybe a month or two, even after the lines are put down. So
Right.
that's one area. And another area, I'm sure all the commuters here have been doored a few times. I regularly get doored in front of the high school and Wheelock. But I don't know what the solution is because it's very hard to separate the parked cars on a narrow street, which is heavily trafficked. So those sort of areas can be thought about problem areas, right?
What's the other dooring spot? I'm sorry,
Oh,
you said the high school and Wheelock?
high school, so when the cars are pulled up in
Right.
front of the high school, you're squeezed between
Right.
high traffic going towards the hospital out of town
Right.
in the mornings
Yeah.
and parked cars on the right.
Right.
And usually drivers are not very attentive. They're opening the doors on both sides.
Right.
So,
You said Wheelock Street was the other one, right?
yeah, and Wheelock Street, when you're coming back through, that's my route. I'm sorry, this might be a personal thing, but I've actually been doored by a neighbor there. So, so people suddenly would open the door and then you're caught between traffic on your left and the open door on the right.
So East Wheelock Street.
Yeah, so those are two problematic areas.
Thank you.
And the last area I would point out in town, again, is when you're on South Park Street, next to the co-op, the bike lane there shrinks from, reasonable 3 feet to 0.
Yeah.
Right, so it's that those sort of small adjustments I feel that could be done without any large scale changes. Anyway.
Thank you. Yes.
Is this a great segue to this next exercise?
Yeah, so this is like, we want to get those sticky dots on the maps. Were there, yes, any other
I
general
just wanted to
questions?
mention, I'm Maggie, and you mentioned the people getting used to the different textures. I lived in downtown Crossing in Boston for over 5 years, and I always was aware of the difference and the feeling when I was driving. And it would be my personal fantasy. You talk about like your personal fantasy about where you bike, as if we could stop traffic here on Main Street. I know that's really mind blowing, but there's some of us who really think that it could be a living room. And that we would all benefit from that in terms of connectivity and being a stronger, healthier community in general. Thank you.
Thank you, thanks. Yes, Barbara?
Just a pet peeve is the giant cars that squeeze out little cars. They need to be segregated.
I don't know how do you do that?
I think something that you brought
Make a
out,
lower entrance.
I think something that you brought out, and particularly when Dick was describing how you change a street, that you go from a street that it's obvious it's built for cars.
Right.
You know that. And now you take a street and it no longer, cars are the dominant feature. Just the design alone changes everyone's concept of what you do in that space. I think that says a lot.
Yes, yes.
I just say, we giggled at how do we deal with the cars, but 13-foot wide lanes tell you to do one thing.
Yes,
9-foot wide lanes tell you to do something else.
Right, no, you're absolutely true, yeah, absolutely. Narrower lanes are key, absolutely. I do know that when you're in Europe, the cars are all small. For many reasons, right? Yes.
I guess lately I've been kind of addressing the community as a member of the school and just the crosswalk. So I work at the middle school right now, and we have crossing guards right now who have not felt safe. So I've been trying to bring that to the community's attention. But we used to live overseas in Switzerland, and if we are really serious about kids walking to school and drivers respecting that crosswalk space, the kids got trained every fall by the police officers. And I was scolded once by a police officer because I stopped well in advance of the crosswalk. But I was kind of just slowly creeping forward, like 1 mile an hour. And the policeman came up to me, he's like, I need you to stop, because the I'm teaching the student to look at your tires and make sure they're actually at a complete stop. I'm like, oh. So they teach them and there's signs all around like, hey, you know, we're in education training for the crossing. Bicyclists are trained by the police officers. There's signs all over. I think Hanover could do a little education like that. I think we would. And then the other thing is the kids are required to walk to school if they live within a certain distance. And that would cut down on some of the in-town traffic.
I love the sign idea when the kids are in training. It's like, it's a great idea. I think, to do that. Yes, Mr. Bucky.
Hi. So what the, one area where the lanes are narrow, but the traffic is high is on Maple Street in between like West and downtown.
Yeah.
So that's an area where it can be a little hair raising to walk on that sidewalk because, you know, trucks with mirrors or things like that.
Yeah.
So any way to kind of slow that down or moderate that or have curbs or something to make it safer. I think
Maple
would be good.
also has like, you know, as you know, a lot of pedestrians and a lot of times they walk, you know, 4 abreast
Yeah,
down the
right.
street in the lane and bikes going through and, you know, so it's heavily used and the sidewalk is so narrow, it's inadequate.
Yeah.
And
there's no
only on
curb,
one side.
right.
It's on one side and it was very narrow right away also. I don't know if that's a prescription right away or not.
It's also supposed to be a bike, like a calm bike route.
Yes,
And it's definitely challenging during the 15 minutes of rush hour.
yeah. Calming, I think, you know, there are options to calm on Maple Street to make it slower. And to
Lots of
make it
kids
feel
like there,
comfortable
too.
to take the lane if you're 8 years old. That's sort of like the metric is like, would you let your 8-year-old bike there? If the answer is yes, then it's safe. If the answer is no, then it's not. So that's kind of like how you think about it, really, in terms of, you know, the street design and what you need to do. But yeah, Maple is a key link, definitely.
Make it a one-way street.
So we need to acknowledge that West and Maple are designed as no truck traffic, no through traffic. They're signed that way. Unfortunately, our school buses and trucks use it as a bypass.
And
because-
UPS goes like all in a row.
So it's already, the signage is there. It's a question of enforcement and the willpower. Political, I mean, I witnessed.
I've been like biking up the hill and, you know, people pass and
Yeah.
buzz me up on West or the same, like they'll speed around me on Maple. I was like, where are you going to? There's a
Yeah.
stop sign over there.
What's the
There's,
rush?
there's something about the street that's not,
Yep.
giving the right signs off that everyone should just chill, even though that it's really wonderfully neck down at Maple and West, right? That was changed. That intersection is great, because then people do slow down around that intersection.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so like in Beijing, like we would often have like more like decorative like floral like or just plants things to like separate a road and like kind of like a side road of like walking, biking, scootering, like whatever. And so like if we're like thinking about like downtown visions, like that could be like an idea essentially like using like either like big flower pots or maybe even planting a row of trees, like something like that. Another thing is that if you like create like a row of trees, that'll like limit your line of sight so it doesn't seem like as wide of a road and so drivers will naturally slow more down. But like speaking to someone else's like vision of just like a more like close to the downtown, I think that would be really cool if you change the texture of the road and also like put in like more like floor arrangement so it seems really clear that it's more like a plaza than like a road and drivers naturally slow down.
Yep. Yeah, thank you for that example. So planters and trees are really, they do help a lot.
Maybe get rid of parking and then put a parking structure up. Because I know that sounds big, but if all these people, like, I see it, it's like a nightmare, people trying to back in and back out and then bikers and scooters and big trucks, and it's a fiasco down here. And then if you are someone in a wheelchair down here trying to get on this sidewalk, it's really treacherous. So redoing that would be a wonderful idea downtown. I know that you have all this commerce and I understand that, but you know, there is that parking, but I think we could invest in too down here. Should we go to stickers?
Yes, let's go to stickers.
So yeah, people just probably want stickers, right? Look at them, they're amazing.
So on, these masks, just tell us, with a sticker, what
The different colors mean different things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
Just
smaller
use any
ones over
color.
there.
So red isn't like my really fair.
I know, I was like, oh yeah, okay.
Common areas that
You need my, my parents told me to get a cyclone.
Like this.